we want you to understand you can start here and scale, and you can still be making a return on your investment and keeping within your budget no matter what level you're at. Welcome to this episode of Think Like a Producer. You're probably going to love this episode if you think about numbers and spreadsheets and money and budgets and how to actually fund a show, because we are talking about budgets and getting a return on your investment. This is as producery as it gets. And we, of course, wanted to cover this topic this season because this whole season is about attracting your dream customers through your media and making the business side of your podcast work for your brand. So we're going to talk about money, and we want this to be really helpful because we're going to give you some things to think about no matter what budget level you're at. And hopefully this will help you kind of avoid some easy pitfalls and give you a really confident structure to think about how to get a return on investment for your show. So first off, we're going to talk to you about some key principles we've seen work very well on a budget and production side. No matter if your budget is like a couple $100s a month and you're just doing audio and really all you're paying for is like an editor to do some very light audio editing, all the way to if you're willing to spend a few $1,000s a month, you're filming everything, you're doing full on video on YouTube and audio, and you've got multiple editors. These principles we're going to talk about should apply on all different budget scales. But just to recap, we've talked about this in past episodes. You could start a podcast and it could just be you and you could do everything yourself. That would literally be the cheapest way to handle it. You're still going to pay a little bit just in like hosting service fees and maybe software fees, but like sub $100. So that would be kind of absolute DIY bare bones. Then if you're willing to pay a little bit, let's say you do an episode every month, every week, you hire an audio editor to do some very minimal editing for you, free up some of your time. And so you might end up spending a few $100s a month just for audio editing, like $100 an episode would be like an entry level spot. Then if you're doing video, you might decide, no, actually, I really see the power of this for my brand. I'm going to go ahead and invest in comprehensive audio editing as well as video editing. And obviously that was where you can bump into like $1,000 to $2,000 to $3,000 a month. And of course you can spend a lot more if you have multiple videographers, multiple editors, multiple episodes a week. Obviously, if you're filming your show in person, that is going to add quite a bit more to the budget because you're paying shooters to come and shoot and light and all the things. So don't feel like just because we're talking to you about businesses and production schedules and return on investment and budgets, this doesn't apply to you if you're still kind of in a hobby phase. We want you to understand you can start here and scale, and you can still be making a return on your investment and keeping within your budget no matter what level you're at. So the most important thing when you're setting your budget for this show and figuring out how much does it make sense to invest in this show is you want to understand what the return on investment you're looking for actually is. For some people who have an existing business or brand where you already have a product you're selling, it might be that you need the show to sell a certain number of your product. Let's say you have a coaching program, or maybe you have books that you sell or some kind of digital product. You need to sell X amount to cover your budget, right? That's pretty clear. Like, okay, the return on investment for my show needs to be that I need to sell this many gigs, spots, courses, subscriptions, books, whatever. So then you would set your budget kind of dependent on how much you could bring in from the product sales. Let's say that's not your goal really at all. You're like, no, I have cash in my marketing budget to put towards this show. I really just need it to be like a brand ambassador. And I just need it to drive awareness of me as either like the face of the company or a media personality or a thought leader in my space or whatever your goal is. So maybe your return on investment is booking more speaking gigs or getting more followers or subscribers to your email list. Maybe it's you're doing this as partly like a social proof project where you're trying to build your credibility as an expert in your space. And so the return on investment is purely the, tagline in your bio that you're a podcast host. And like that is actually really significant for you. So you get to decide what the return on investment is that makes sense for you and your brand and your goals. But that's how to think about your budget in relation to your return on investment. We see this all the time with awesome clients and friends and people in our industry who come to us and are so excited about their show. And when we ask them, okay, what's the return on investment you're looking for? They're like, um, just I just want to make it. And so that's where we have a real conversation. We're like, okay, awesome. Also, to make this show sustainable, to keep the lights on, to make sure that this is nourishing you in the business, we need to get clear on a return on investment. And it doesn't have to be monetary, but let's make sure everyone who's working on this show understands what the return on investment needs to be so that all the decisions about growing and making the show better funnel into making that return on investment come back. Okay, pretty simple, but you would be surprised how often this gets like skipped over. And as professional producers, we want to give you the goods. So that's how to think about a budget and a return on investment. And obviously, it's different for everyone. Now, I kind of hinted at the second thing that's really important to think about with a budget and a return on investment. So, Tiff, tell us about this idea of sustainability.
I will. I just want to make sure that everyone understands that I had such a big flashback when Christine said, "So what's your return on investment? What's your ROI?" When we ask clients this, it's just so interesting because we know that it's not a bad thing. No one's ever asked them. That's our jobs as producers to ask these questions because I think everyone's first thought, which you talked about, is just money, financials. And it's not always that. We've been a part of brands that podcasts are growing their entire company and awareness and brand. And the money is coming from a totally different place because they have so much audience, because they have so many subscribers, so many numbers. So I just had a quick little chill go through my body when you asked that question. Like, so what's the ROI? And that just like look up, I'm not really sure from people, but yes, this is what we want you to think about. And when you're thinking about your ROI, Christine mentioned a lot of great examples of what an ROI for your particular business or podcast or media company can be. I really, and we really want to make sure that you are thinking about consistency over everything else, sustainability, being able to set a goal and not just hit it in the first 3 months, but be able to sustain it for the next 6 months, the next 12 months. What does your podcast look like? Can it grow by 5% over the next 5 years consistently? These are the kinds of things we want you to think about because I come from a very motivational, inspirational background. So does Christine, working on these podcasts. And I think that setting really big goals and reaching far beyond what you think you're capable of is always a good thing. And also, you want to be able to celebrate. You want to be able to actually mark that win in your calendar. And if you have a team, you want to be able to celebrate together when you've hit that big goal. Not that you set this big goal that you guys can't accomplish for a decade. What are we looking forward to as a team, soon that we can see and that we can kind of feel the rewards that we have? I think that commitment, actually, I'm not going to say this. This isn't me. This is Denzel Washington. And I saw this on a speech that he had. And I wanted to make sure I read this quote for everyone. Without commitment, you'll never start. Oh my gosh, I'm going to do it, Christine. It's going to be great. Ready? The quote is without commitment, you'll never start. But more importantly, without consistency, you'll never finish. And I just think goals that you can obtain, that you can finish, that you can complete, and then set more goals is going to be great when you're thinking about this budget and ROI. And if we're talking on a money sense, to me, capital is always king. I've been learning a lot more about money as I've been my own business and producing and supporting other people, working as a freelancer for other companies. I realized that I've had to understand money a lot more. And if I don't have double or triple in my bank account, I'm not spending it on a camera, right? There's just certain things I have to think about. So if you want to have, hire 5 employees to take your podcast to another level, my question is, do you have enough money in your bank account right now that you can actually cover those salaries? And then is your podcast and your income enough that that's going to be able to, you not only have that now, but you'll have 3 times that in the next year or 2 years. So again, this is something I'm learning just as my own business, but anyone else who's starting their podcast financially or trying to have certain goals, you really want to think about and research certain like obtainable money goals for yourself to be sustainable, to be consistent, and to be able to celebrate with you and your team. And what we talked about with the non-financials too. If you're saying that you want to have a certain amount of guests on, I want to be able to actually do a unique interview every week. We'll have 52 unique guests, no repeats for an entire year. That's a very big goal, but you can do it. You know what I mean? But it's got to be small and consistent. It gives your team something to look forward to. It's sustainable, and it gives you a chance to actually challenge yourself in a way of meeting a whole bunch of brand new people that you've never met before. So just think about these things. Set yourself up with obtainable goals, be sustainable. There's no need to burn out. We talk about emotional intelligence as much as we talk about anything else, and we want everyone to be happy as they're growing their podcast. But getting more into the line items, if you don't know, there's different kinds of producers. And one of my favorite kinds of producers are called line producers. Those are the ones who actually are in charge of the budgets. And those are the ones that are line item by line item, setting how much money we can spend, what we're spending things on, collecting receipts, logging those receipts. There's a lot of fun things that go into it. But Christine, I'd love for us to talk a little bit more about how to manage a budget, whether you're a line producer or not, even though big productions, you'd have a separate person just handling this. But for people who are listening right now, who are starting out, what is a good way to manage a budget?
Yeah, well, it obviously starts with equipment because you need some equipment to get going. So, if you're starting out, you're going to need to figure out how much you can spend on a microphone at the bare minimum. But obviously, if you're going to do filming, if you're going to get a camera, this is what Tiff and I do. We use actual cameras, not our laptop cameras, to do this production, even though we're remote. So, if you're like, oh, I really want to elevate the quality of my video, I'm going to invest in a camera. If you want to do lights, because you're filming, look at the difference, you guys. I'm just gonna say it. Look at the difference between the quality of lighting on Tiff right now and the quality of lighting on me. Tiff has like really beautiful light set up in her place. I have none. I am sitting in front of like a window. That's the difference right there between having natural lighting and having professional lighting. And then, of course, like if there's always accessories, you could get like fancy headphones and windscreens and boom setups, and you could invest in as much equipment as you want. But at a minimum, you're going to want a good microphone. So that's going to be the start. And the cool thing is that's like a one-time investment. So you have a separate budget kind of for your launch, including your equipment purchases. Um, and that should serve you for a good long while. Obviously, you can upgrade your equipment as time passes if the show's really going where you want it to go and you're getting the return on investment. But typically, you're only going to buy equipment every so often. So that's budget item number one. We've talked about this on past episodes. You could spend $50 on a mic and go to town, or you could spend thousands on multiple pieces of equipment. So if you're interested in some of our like recommended equipment resources, check out the worthfulmedia.com resources page. That's where we have listed tons of our best recommendations for equipment and software and all kinds of things. We'll link that in the show notes for you. Now, you're also going to want to consider software, whether it's recording software, editing software. We use a remote recording platform called Squadcast to record this show because Tiff lives in LA and I live in Salt Lake City. But you could maybe use Riverside or Zencaster. Maybe you decide you don't want to use those. You like Zoom because it's easy and familiar. So maybe you have to upgrade your Zoom account so you have more storage. If you are recording in person, you may very well use software like Adobe Audition or Pro Tools or any of the other great recording softwares. Now, none of these are going to break the bank. Most of these are around like $15, $20 a month on a subscription. So that's the good news. But you want to think about that because little things are going to start adding up. Then you're going to think about storage, right? We've talked about this in past episodes. Files start to accumulate, and you're pretty soon, especially if you're filming your show, you're going to need to start buying more storage for a cloud or an actual hard drive. You're not going to, it's not crazy expensive, but think about it. $20 here, $20 there, $50 here. Like it's starting to add up, right? And then obviously, depending on how you edit your show, you're going to need to probably pay for some kind of editing software or editing service. So whether you have an editor on your team, you outsource to an agency, Worthful Media, that's my company, that's what we do. Whether or not you decide to pay for a professional audio editing software like Adobe Audition, that's my personal favorite. Little things starting to add up. And then outside of that, obviously video, if you need to hire a video editor, then you need to hire a video editor, that software as well. But then the last part that I think oftentimes it's easy to kind of forget is marketing. Because unless you're doing all the marketing for your show yourself, meaning you're making all the assets to market, you're cutting all the clips, you're making all the social media posts and graphics, it's very likely you're going to want to outsource that as well. So that's another piece. If you have a social media manager on your team, if you want to hire someone to kind of help you build and promote the show out in the world, then I would definitely consider that as a budget item, kind of a marketing budget. I'm not saying put money behind like spending, I'm not saying buying ad space to promote your podcast. Like, yes, you can do that down the line. For some people, it makes sense, but I'm saying like down the line. For most people, that does not make sense at the beginning or the first long while. But I am saying, like, having someone that you actually pay to help you market the show, because it turns out this is like a pretty big engine and it's hard to run it with one person. It's super helpful to have at least one other person helping you manage and market and share the show, whether that's a copywriter, a social media manager, somewhere, someone in that realm. Okay, now you may think we're done. And we are if you have an audio only show. Like those would be the main budget items to consider, and you could sustainably go with those things covered for a very long time. But if you are filming your show in person, let's say you have some kind of like home studio or you have studio space, part of like commercial space that you own or rent, and you really want to do in-person productions, whether that's you just straight to the camera or you have interviews with guests, you're going to want to consider some other expenses that are often overlooked. So, Tiff, tell us about those.
The very first one that I think it's overlooked a little too much: food and refreshments. That could be in the form of coffee, that could be in the form of just water bottles, or just a source for people to fill up or refill water. I don't know if you ever noticed, like on a talk show, you have the two mugs. Usually they're labeled, with the name of the show or something. Doesn't have to be. But usually, it's got something in there. Guests, especially for long shows, talking for 60 minutes, 90 minutes, would love to have something to drink. Also snacks and things that you can offer them, but not only them, their team. A lot of interviews that I've done, most people come with somebody else, whether it's their agent or a whole other set of video people that are following them into your interview. That usually most guests have teams or people that are there with them. And then of course your own team, and making sure that they are happy and fed and hydrated, especially if you're someone like people I've worked with who we might record 2 or 3 podcasts in a row. I've even done 4 podcasts in one day, 2 hour long podcasts in one day. I don't quite recommend it, but it's possible. It's possible for some people, I guess, who like to do it. A lot of storage, so much storage, so much standing, so many lights. But overall, definitely food and refreshments, very, very important. Another thing to consider if you're going to do something, which we talked about, in this particular season, we talked about way more than we had in the first season. If you're going to do a campaign or some sort of mini series or something that's more documentary style, and you're going to be out and about on the streets, vlogging today can sort of get away with a lot of things, but there's permits that cost money that are involved, and that requires, sometimes even blocking off parts of the streets for parking for your crew that are going to be there. Sometimes if people have parking in one area and they need to be shuttled to a different area where you're actually shooting, that's van rentals, that's gas money. There's like so many things that go into it. And it's not to scare you, it's more just so to think about the little things that you don't just show up on set with your two camera guys or camera women, which I prefer, but camera people, and and you're just like, what do we do now if a officer stops you, or if someone asks you, what are you guys filming? The bigger cameras draw way more attention, and that's when permits and things really start to become super important. Especially here in Los Angeles, I would say something people don't think about is security. If you're going to go to certain areas where maybe you're not familiar with, or if you're documenting, the homeless or something like that around Skid Row, having an actual paid security guard there to protect you and your people, and that everyone is safe. There's just things that come along with being in person, come along with the video side of things. And, this isn't necessarily financial, but it's something more so on the documenting side of like having releases. I think we are so used to a vlogging world where we record anything that we want and we post it, but for things that are going to be possibly sold to streaming services or things you may want to use in a more professional sense when they're released, you need to actually get people's permission to use their face. You need a photo video release. Podcasts, you should have that too. I would recommend that for you as people are, you know, seeing that it's very important to have someone actually give that permission, not just verbal permission, not just email permission, but hey, we recorded this podcast. You are now releasing your image to us and allowing us to do what we want with it. Sounds scary, but it's legally needs to actually be signed. So these are things that just to think about and to just save yourself, because I'll say it probably for the fifth time in a row, but like with this YouTube world, with this sort of like, we kind of do what we want and we post on social media. We don't think about other people. As you get bigger, as you grow, legal documents and all these things are going to be very, very important to have. Or you could spend years recording footage that you're not allowed to use anywhere else but YouTube, which may not be beneficial for you and your team. We talked about a lot today. There's a lot for you to digest. I really highly recommend that you go back and watch some of our older episodes and listen to where we talk about podcast equipment. We break it down even more about money. But overall, like we said, season 2, this podcast in general, it's all about giving you these biteable mini-sized versions, bite-sized, thank you, bite-sized versions of things that we do when we talk to clients, when we meet with people, and we do have more resources and more ways that you can work with us if that's something that you're interested in, so that you can get more of a custom recommendation when it comes to these things. But overall, we'd love for you to subscribe to the podcast, leave a review on iTunes. It really helps us learn what you're learning, helps us kind of create what we're going to continue to create for the rest of the show. And like I said, it's just great to hear your feedback. We love talking to ourselves, to be honest. I mean, I love talking to you, Christine, truly. But also, we'd love to hear your feedback too and know what you think. You can also watch us on YouTube. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, leave a comment. If you have any follow-up questions, let us know. This podcast was birthed from just answering questions, so we love to do it. And until next time, we will see you on Think Like a Producer.
Record. Get such joy now out of my little clap.
Like, it's freezing. I mean, it's like maybe 50, 45. It's just, compared to LA, it's cold. Thanks so much for watching this episode.
Check out this next video about what you need to know when you're hiring a film crew.